May is Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month. If you've been around for a while, you know that maternal wellness is near and dear to my heart. If you listen to my story in episode 29, you won't be surprised to hear that I really wish I had been able to do more planning specifically around my mental health ahead of welcoming my children into this world. And this is exactly what I'll be talking about with today's guest. Kayce Hodos is a maternal mental health therapist and coach. Before we dive in, I just want to note that everything that Kayce shares today is intended to be educational and should not be considered medical advice. Hi, I'm Allison Edgety, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Well, hi, Kayce. Thank you so much for joining me today. I like to consider myself a planner, but after struggling with postpartum anxiety, I realized that I had not quite done the ideal planning in that area ahead of welcoming my girls. And I didn't even do better the second time around. And I've heard this from a lot of my friends and clients who struggled that despite feeling like they were prepared, they weren't really prepared. So I'm really excited for us to tackle the topic of planning for your postpartum mental health journey. But before we dive in, I always like to ask my guests to briefly share what inspired them to pursue their vocation.
Yeah. Well, hey, Allison, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, like motherhood basically inspired me. My own, deep, dark experience with postpartum anxiety just left me feeling blindsided. And I just was constantly saying, why is nobody talking about this? Like, why is nobody telling the truth about how hard this is? And so I had the help of my own therapist to help me through and my loving partner and my support system. And when I eventually like climbed out of my darkness and got myself together, I started just devouring any content and education and training that I could on perinatal mental health. And I just made it my mission to, tell the truth about motherhood and to support new mothers through their own journey.
I'm so curious, how long did it take you to identify that you were struggling after you had your baby?
Oh, it hit me right away, and I'm an open book. Like I'm a therapist, and so like with my clients, I don't always, we have to be careful about self disclosing, but I'm very honest because of the clients I work with. They are there um in that messy part of early motherhood. So I try to be really open with them about my own journey. Um, it hit me pretty quickly. Like, I remember the first week, of my son's life, we had a terrible time with breastfeeding. He was losing weight. It was one of those times when we were going to the pediatrician, like, every day of that first week. It was so exhausting, like, every
Mhm.
morning, having no sleep and having to get everything packed up and just feeling completely unprepared, tired, scattered, and trying to go to the doctor and just hoping that like I hope I'm doing something right. Maybe I hope he's gained enough weight and just feeling so scrutinized by the pediatrician's office. And the pediatrician was actually the first person who looked at me really and said, "How are you doing?" And I was like,
Mm.
I guess I'm okay. This is really hard. I just started mumbling something, and he was like, no, how are you really doing? And they did the screening, even way back then, that was 2012. So, a lot has changed since then, but at the time, yeah, so it was like the first week that I felt like this is this is not what's supposed to be happening. Um, and and then I think after that, that felt like depression to me. And it was probably combined, probably a little bit of the baby blues and a little bit of, a lot of different things, just being stressed out.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think once that once my baby, I knew my baby was like gaining weight and eating enough, and I was going to supplement with formula and like whatever, like I got that back on track. Then the anxiety really kicked in, and I
Mhm.
started just not being able to sleep when I had the opportunity to sleep, and and that just led to more problems and just questioning everything in my head about what I should be doing to do it the right
Mhm.
way, just Googling nonstop about like the right way to sleep train and, you know, uh, feed with formula versus breast, like beating myself about the breastfeeding and just anything and everything.
Yes. Yeah, that's where the mom guilt, which I think is alive and well in all of us, and it just morphs throughout different seasons of
Yes,
parenting. But that's your kind of initial exposure out of the gate, and I too had nursing struggles and ultimately had to formula feed, and just immediately you feel like a failure, and
right.
for I think I find with a lot of women I talk to, and by no means am I a therapist, but when you are someone who's a planner and analytical, you can really get in your own head. Like, where did I go wrong here? Clearly, I didn't plan correctly. And you're so analytical, you immediately think you're failing because you've done way too much reading online. And so it just
Hmm.
compounds whatever is happening hormonally. And it's hard. I was curious when you noticed you were struggling because sometimes I think it's hard to see it within ourselves because again, we're
Hmm.
overanalyzing like I should be able to do this. I need to get it together and it's hard. I never really admitted I was having a problem till I got out on the other side and I could look back and I thought, "Wow, I should have admitted I had a problem and I should have gotten help." But when I was in it, all I could think was, I should be able to do this. I planned for this. I wanted all of this. I need to do it. And
Hmm.
I never really got the help that I should have had. So I'm always curious, particularly when it comes to a therapist who has training that the average mother does not have. I'm always curious if they can see it in themselves sooner than
Hmm.
some of us can.
Yeah, yeah, I do think I probably, recognized that, like, something was off, maybe more so than the typical person, but I did at that time, I did not have the perinatal mental health training. I had,
Right.
training in treating anxiety and depression and diagnosing that, but not the very specific perinatal type, so I didn't really know much about that, and when like, fast forward to, like, 2017, I think it was, when I took my first training through Postpartum Support International, um, that was very eye-opening because I could really recognize then that, like, "Whoa, that was totally me," and I felt so seen and heard for the first time in since
Yes.
my own struggle. So, yeah, it can take a while sometimes. And with perinatal mental health, a lot of times we're referring to this as postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, but really it can happen at any point during pregnancy and up to the first year after childbirth. So that,
Right.
I learned that, in my training and thought, "Wow, yeah, that whole first year is really hard." So
Right.
it's no wonder, you know?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because and I've told this story before on another episode, but I realize again in hindsight, my anxiety started during pregnancy. And the doctor noticed it. I don't think he handled it in the best way, but in one of my visits with him, just the regular checkup during your pregnancy, somehow I went on this whole side tangent about my fear of getting Lyme disease and that I felt like I shouldn't be outside. and that I was gonna get Lyme disease. I can't even remember exactly what I did, but I went on this whole side tangent about Lyme disease, which now I realize, like, that was a completely now yes, there's Lyme disease in our area of the country,
Right.
but I'd never had a tick on he asked, like, "Have you had a tick on you lately?" And I said, "No, I've never had a tick." And I remember what he said to me was, "Have you ever been professionally treated for anxiety?" And I said, "No." And then that was the end of it. He never said, "Well, I
Mm.
think you're having it," or "Maybe we should look into this whole tangent you've gone on." So he asked the question and then he let it drop, and I was thinking now if I could turn back time, I wish he would have helped me a little bit there and kinda helped me
Mhm.
pursue that because now I realize my anxiety that I had postpartum, it really started during my pregnancy with some of my irrational fears I had.
Mhm.
But like you said, it wasn't until I got into this line of work and I started doing some trainings and hearing about it, I thought, "Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. I was struggling there." I love
Mhm.
that your pediatrician took the time well, I guess your child's pediatrician took the time to
Right.
ask you and have you take that beat of wait, yeah, how am I? We're so focused on this baby gaining weight. How am I?
Right.
And so I love that. And you did make mention, that was 2012. I had my first in 2013. That we've made a
Okay.
lot of that we've made a lot of progress since then. And I'm curious, I wanted to ask you about that. Do you feel like there has been noteworthy progress made in the area of better preparing parents around perinatal and postpartum mental health?
I think there has been progress. I still think we have a long way to go, because I think we focus heavily, especially in the United States, we're newsflash, we're very materialistic. And we focus on the baby shower and the gender reveal and all the gear and what kind of fabulous jogger stroller are you gonna get and the stuff and the cute baby clothes and yes, like I love that people have fun with that stuff and putting together their registry and all of that. But I just feel like your emotional needs should also be part of that conversation. And I do wish that OBGYNs and other healthcare providers were a little more just like what you said when you described that conversation with your doctor. I think sometimes that is exactly what happens, that they feel like, well, mental health is not um my area, so I'm going to stay in my lane here. But they see women throughout that whole pregnancy and they are really um you know they are in a position where they can identify that stuff, that that irrational thinking, or that a little bit of maybe compulsory type behavior that the mother might be mentioning, or when your partner comes with you to those appointments, like I think they should be just including, just having a deeper conversation about the mental health stuff that can happen. I don't think we quite are respectful enough of a woman's intelligence to you know, to talk about this stuff with her. It's almost like we don't want to scare women. So, and it's just like, no, this is not about fear mongering. This is about information and giving women the tools, to prepare for the things that they can prepare for. Can you prepare 100%? No. But there are some things we can do to help women lower their risk.
Right. And it's so much more than I think when I left the hospital, they gave us some sheet, typed out sheet, and I remember the big thing was them they either said it to my husband or it was on the sheet of, "If she doesn't wanna take care of the baby, there's a problem." And that was never my issue, I always wanted to take care of the baby, and so I think it kind of,
Mm,
blurred our vision as to what was normal and not normal. Because the big red flag that they had stressed was if she's doesn't feel up for taking care of the baby, you gotta call and get help right away. But there's
right. Like
so
that's the only
much
sign.
Yeah, there's so much more in between. And this is where I do personally think, as dangerous as Google can be and as overwhelming as all of it can be, I do feel like social media has been helpful in this regard of giving women a platform to share their story and then other people a platform to share other people's story. Just for it to spread a
Mhm.
little bit more, I think has helped
Yeah,
educate
I agree.
women.
Yeah, there's a lot more
Absolutely.
honesty now, I think, than there
Totally.
was. Yeah, yeah, and so many people get there, and especially with the during the pandemic, I think that social media was, for a lot of people, the only connection they had with the outside world there for a while, you know? And
That's
so
right.
when moms were just, making, just silly, even the silliest videos about like how messy their house was, or, their kids running around like crazy, or they, feeding their kid PB&J for dinner or whatever, whatever it is, like that kind of like real mom life stuff. Yeah, I think all of that's helpful. Like anytime we can just feel like we can tell the truth about, how messy motherhood is, and yes, is enjoyable, and yes, we love our kids, and yes, we like to share cute photos, and there's another side to it too, and we need to be talking about the big picture, not just the pretty parts.
That's right. So I know one of your areas of interest is the actual preparing women for this in advance so they aren't on the defense and they can and be thinking ahead of what their mental health postpartum may look like. And so what do you think are a few things that women can do in that area? So if someone listening is expecting, what would be two or three things that you'd say, okay, if nothing else, keep this in mind or do this?
Well, I would say during pregnancy, and and ideally, like before you even get pregnant, like you're thinking about your mental health. I would love it for everybody to just include their mental health in their health. Like when we talk about health, we tend to separate it, like your physical health and your mental health, but really, like it's all connected. Um, and so, as part of taking care of yourself, I hope that you are taking care of your mental health, and whether that means getting, so support, of course. Like I think support is absolutely key. Even if you're introverted, even if you're shy, like whatever, that social anxiety, all that, okay, yes. And you still need support. We all need people. Humans are social creatures. So we may need different amounts of support and engagement with others, but we all need support. And so whatever that looks like to you, whatever feels like the amount of support, support is very subjective. So if I feel supported by a certain person, that person is supportive, right? If this person calls themselves a friend of mine, but I don't really feel supported, or I feel kind of negative after I spend time with that person's not your support. So it can look like that, just surrounding yourself and spending time with friends and talking about your pregnancy with people, and talking about how, if you have any worries or fears, we all do. And once we say it out loud, that takes some of the sting out of it, and it neutralizes it a little bit. And so, talk to your friends about it. Talk to your friends about stuff besides your pregnancy too. Have hobbies, have things that you're interested in that are not baby related. Have date nights with your partner, and just spend time like thinking about your own needs and what feels good to you. What kinds of things do you want to do with your time? um, and really just I just think that is the best kind of self-care, to really like get to know yourself. So yeah, so just spending your time doing things. Exercise, of course, like is good for all of us, but it doesn't have to be hardcore. So I think we have to be careful, with our anxious listeners, who are maybe taking notes and like saying, "Oh, this therapist thinks I should do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll have a great like motherhood experience." We have to be flexible too. I say prepare, and have some flexibility, mixed in there. Like have a buffer for when things don't go as planned. Um, but I think when you have a foundation where you feel healthy and that you are taking time for yourself, and to connect with other people, I think that's kind of like the groundwork that you can do during pregnancy to set yourself up for success and to have that support kind of already there when you need it.
So it sounds like you're saying it'd be good for people to have a strategy because all of that takes some support. So if you're saying make sure you have time to go out and exercise, even if that for me at that time would have been going for a walk. So to have that time. But I went for many walks with my baby. In hindsight, I needed more walks by myself. So
Mhm.
I think it's if I'm hearing you, a big piece of advice would be to talk about those strategies ahead of the baby arriving so that you and your partner in your sleep deprived state aren't suddenly trying to figure out how to give you a moment by yourself.
Mhm. Right, right. And and not everybody needs the same kind of me time. Um, I remember like everybody encouraging me, go get your nails done, go get your nails done. We have the baby, like go and I was just like, I don't think I want to get my nails done. Like
Oh.
people were and I know they were being helpful. Like they were thinking of things that sounded like self-care to them. But really, like what I would have loved is for like somebody to take the baby out of the house and everybody leave me alone in my home, you know, and let me just read a book, like, because that's what I really wanted more than anything. Still do, still love that when my husband takes my kid and they disappear for an afternoon. Like, I love that. Um, and so I think that part of like just getting to know yourself and reflecting on what you really want. That's really important because other people might have ideas about what you can do to take care of yourself, but that may not be actually what you need. Did I
I
answer
think
your
that
question?
you did. I think that's a really great point because I remember the one time I really felt like, wow, I needed this. I had this urge of wanting to drive to Target. There's a Starbucks in the Target, and to get a Starbucks and walk around the Target. And I forget what got me there. I don't know if I told my husband I'm out of here. I can't remember, but I have a
Right.
very, very clear memory of walking around Target with an empty cart and my Starbucks and thinking to myself, this is exactly what I needed. And it's funny because I've always loved Target and um, usually I would not be walking around with an empty cart. But I think your point's a really good one. And that is a piece that people could think about in advance. Like, you already know what fills your cup, or you at least you wanna start to think about it in advance, like this,
Mhm.
"Oh, yeah, I can always feel good after I do this," and so that you are having those plans in advance. So, I know when I'm feeling overwhelmed, "Babe, I'm gonna need you to take the baby out of the house and give me an
Right.
hour or 90 minutes to myself so I can read." Whereas for me, it was I needed to get out of the house and be by myself. So I think that's a really good point. And on kind of that within that conversation, we're kind of assuming that people have an active partner. Not all people have an active partner when they're pregnant to talk through these strategies, but most often when we think about who's the closest person to a new mom, it's going to be their partner. Can we talk about the best ways to prepare a partner to support a new mom? So, I mentioned to you before we got started that I interviewed 3 men whose wives struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety. And I really wanted to hear their perspective. And some of the feedback that they shared was they felt helpless. They didn't
Mm.
know how to help. Even when they could tell something wasn't right, they weren't sure what to do. And I think a lot of partners can relate to that. And I would love to know what advice you have for preparing a partner to best support a new mom.
Mhm. Yeah, and it all communication once again, during pregnancy, just really sitting down and as part of that, thinking about things you want to put on your registry, like include this conversation, in the same, maybe make a day of it, right? Like we're gonna register for some things and we're gonna talk about our mental health. Um, and I think a partner, can just watch out for, you know, for signs that, there's so much information online, and like PSI is a great postpartum.net, great place to go. They have information for dads, moms, they have groups, they have all kinds of things on there. So I think like information is really important. But even if you take, postpartum anxiety and depression out of the picture, like every mom needs a supportive partner. And everybody needs, their basic needs met, right? Like, so it could be as simple as having mom's favorite snacks ready and available, having her water bottle full of water, all the time, maybe several water bottles placed throughout the home, wherever she's going to be breastfeeding baby or feeding baby, however she chooses to feed her baby. um, having having her favorite music like ready to play from the phone, from the iPhone, like it's all about once again, like meeting her where she is for her unique needs.
Mhm.
And all of the, a lot of this stuff can be, just, talked about and planned ahead of time. Um, and not all of it can, right? We're not trying to prepare for every possible scenario. But when it comes to like your basic needs, she would like to take a shower, I bet. Like Allison, I know you probably remember the days when you could either grab a snack, take a shower, or take a
Load the
nap.
dishwasher.
Right. Or like, yeah, or do a chore, right? Like it was like one of these things can happen today, but not all of them. So,
Right.
um, but wouldn't it be lovely if every mother who wanted to could take a shower every day if she wants to, right?
Totally.
And so just being cognizant about the time and when can the partner, grab it. And some, we we can't speak to everybody's situation here, but
Mhm.
if a partner has paternity leave, that's excellent, right? Like we know not everybody gets to have that. But if that's the case, and he or she happens to be around for those first few weeks of baby's life, then that's a great time to really like dive right in and care for baby, care for mom, listen to what she's saying. Um, having things available for her to grab, her favorite blanket, I don't know, like just comforting things, that's a great time to do that. And if you don't have a paternity leave, it's okay during pregnancy. That's when you can talk about all this stuff and kind of have a good, roadmap.
Right. And, I'm thinking about two of the men talked about the early signs they saw where they thought, oh, this isn't quite right. And they mentioned a form of anger. So one said she was angry at him often, and the other said she had this anxiety around time. And so she was angry if things got out of time or very upset. And so it got me thinking, Casey, if am a partner and I meet you at a cocktail party, we're at a cocktail party, and I have an angry partner at home who I'm like, wow, she's really struggling, but she's also angry at me. I might be nervous to take this on with my partner. And so I'm curious if I pulled you aside at the party and said, oh my gosh, so and so just told me what you do. And I'm really concerned about my wife. She seems very angry, and I'm worried she has postpartum anxiety or depression. What would you tell me to do?
Hmm. I would ask first about if she's getting any sleep, because sleep is, imperative, as you know. And I mean, if she's not, nobody's getting enough sleep, probably, right, during those first few weeks. But um, if she is sleep deprived, then that is going to make the rage, the anxiety, any depression, like any of those symptoms worse. So the first thing I would want to know is if she was getting enough sleep. Um, Second, I would tell him to, to find her someone to talk to, like to talk to her about talking to somebody,
Mhm.
and to, because it's, he can be very supportive and communicate with her and listen, but she might need, a professional to go to really like unload a lot of this stuff. Um, because we can certainly expect partners to be supportive, but we can't expect them to be everything.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where I would start, and I'd probably like give him like the PSI website that I've mentioned already, I think twice. um, and I would encourage them to maybe, go maybe attend like a new parenting group together. 'Cause I think
Mhm.
there's so many resources that there's not just one way, to come at this. It really is about, calling in the locals, the actual support network that and then it's also, and finding other kinds of support, finding professional support. Um, and just talking about things honestly and getting it out in the open, because there's so much shame around this stuff. And I think that is one of the reasons why sometimes it does come out as rage, because
Mhm.
we're just inside of our heads judging ourselves, and maybe even perceiving other people as judging us too. And when you are in a sleep deficit, um, everything's worse, everything's amped up. And so I just think it's really important to be just talking and checking on each other throughout those first few weeks, months, years.
And when I think about that, deciding that you need help, whether you decide it on your own or your partner says, "Hey, I really think you need someone to talk to," then it's like, "Oh my gosh, it's one more thing on my mental load." So now you need me to go find someone to talk to, which is daunting in and of itself. And so if the partner wants to take on some of that load of looking into someone for their partner to talk to, would you start with the PSI website, or where would be a good starting point for a partner to get that ball rolling so it's just not one more thing on this new mom's checklist of now I have to find a therapist or someone to talk to?
Yeah, and I would say don't surprise her, with a list of therapists. Um, but so, consent is important. So, but starting that conversation, like, hey, like, I don't know, like maybe, if you ever thought about, you think talking to somebody who specializes in all this new mom stuff might be helpful. Kind of getting the ball rolling, like just talking with her about it. But yes, so I mean, OBGYNs are a great resource. Sometimes they even have provided, they are really good now about providing like a little packet of, local resources
Mm,
for new parents. Not all of them, but but that, they could start there. If, it's important to feel comfortable wherever you're starting, because
mhm,
yes, because you're right. It is intimidating to start the process of either encouraging somebody you love to get help, or to start looking for somebody to talk to. It can be really overwhelming, and just it can feel frankly like threatening, Um so I say start with whatever feels most doable.
mhm,
Whatever Wherever you start, it's going to be scary, so let's just accept that it's not easy. There's no
mhm,
magic bullet for like making this process easy.
mhm,
So what is the lowest lift type way to get started, right? And for
mhm,
some people, that might be looking at a website. For other people, it might be calling their doctor. For other people, it might be contacting the pediatrician, because, oh, the pediatrician is watching out for the baby, but maybe they're like adjacent to me, so that they might have
mhm.
something to help me, but it feels maybe less threatening than going to your own doctor. Um, but there's so many ways to get started. There's even a national maternal mental health hotline now, which is
Mm.
amazing, that you can call or text at any time. Partners
Oh,
can,
that's
moms can. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
great. We should
Uh,
include that in the show notes. So I'd love to get that from you so we can include that for people in the
Great.
show notes.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So, even that and it, that is not that's not a crisis line. That's not a suicide hotline. There's that too. And certainly if you're feeling that way, then yes, call 911, call this hotline, like there are resources for those types of situations. But if it's just because like you're in the middle of the night feeding baby who will not go to sleep and you are just in a really dark place, there's somebody that you can talk to at that moment. And that's really important to consider that, like, no matter where you are, there's somebody who's out there. You don't have to do this alone.
That's amazing to know about a resource like that.
Mhm.
I recently read that because of the rise of childcare costs, that nearly 60% of grandparents are now actively providing some form of childcare. And I see that. I see it with my clients, I see it with my friends. And this leads me to believe that this is also a group of grandparents who are likely a strong part of a mother's postpartum village, which I think is amazing. But I want to talk about preparing this kind of close knit village that's beyond your partner and preparing them to be supportive of a new mom and also to have boundaries where we need to have boundaries, because I also see that with my clients. Sometimes it's hard to have those boundaries. And so, for those who have family nearby that will be supporting them, how do you recommend they prepare their family members to best support them around mental health specifically?
Well, I am a fan of matching support system members with jobs that are best suited for them. So, Aunt Susie might, really not care for cooking, a meal and dropping it off for you, but she absolutely loves your dog. So tell Aunt Susie, hey, like, can you come over and walk our dog or fetch with our dog for a little while because we are pretty much up to our eyeballs in, poopy diapers right now. So could you just do that for us? And that, so if if somebody really, really wants to hold the baby, okay, well that's the person that can help you with the baby, and you really trust them. So just thinking about the people and all of the jobs. So I tell couples like write down all the things, like keep track over the next few days of all the things that you're doing in the house. All that stuff, some of it's probably can wait, like the lawn, right? If you can probably like wait a few weeks to be out landscaping, right? But stuff like laundry and just having fresh sheets on the bed. That side note, that was one of the my favorite things that my mom did during the first 2 weeks of my son's life. Like one of the first things she did was just change the sheets on our bed. And that was so lovely because I don't think I would have gotten around to that. Probably, I don't even know. I don't even want to think. There's no way that was on my list of priorities.
Right.
But it was amazing to be able to go to bed, on fresh sheets that night. So, if somebody, like, put that on the list and ask people, like, that, these are the things that we really would love your support with. Because it's not always, holding the baby so you can take a nap. It doesn't always look like that. And I
Right.
think, and I know you said mental health, but I think having chores done and tasks taken care of and errands, taken care of and grocery shop for, I think all of that ties into mental health because those are the
Absolutely.
things that, right? They're in the back of your mind. Like, oh God, when are we going to make it to the grocery store? Or when are we going to, like, schedule that Instacart order or whatever? And there are people who can do that for you. And it's okay to ask them for that, and just because they're helping you doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean you owe them or you've got to start like figuring out what to do to pay them back or write a thank you note. Like, no, this is a village. This is how everybody works together as part of the team. So so don't be afraid, that any job is like too dirty,
Yeah.
for somebody in your support system to do, because people want to help, and they don't always offer specific help. My mom is a very special kind of helper, where she just went in there and she just found the sheets and changed them. Like I didn't I don't really have to ask her, which is like, sometimes that's a problem. But there are other people in your support system who are just going to say like, well, let me know if you need anything. And
Right.
that is hard to know, like, what to say to those people. But hey, you can say, hey, I mean, how do you feel about just coming over and tidying up a little bit, or running to the grocery store for a couple of things, or dropping off a meal in a cooler on the porch, because I really don't feel like having visitors right now. Like, that's okay too, to ask for that. That is support.
Right. Totally. I always, with new moms that I know or new moms in my neighborhood, I like to reach out and say, I'm thinking about you. I want to do something for you today. And I'll list some ideas, but I might say,
Hmm.
can I drop off a meal? Can I leave you a coffee on the front step? I give them several that would involve not actually having to see me. So can I do this? And then I'll say,
Yes.
or if you want me to hold the baby while you take a nap, or if you want me to sit and have coffee with you, do any of these sound appealing? Because I want to do something. So you tell me what it is. And I feel like by giving that variety, sometimes I'm able, I hope, to actually give them what they need, which sometimes
Hmm.
I've had one friend that was like, "Can you just leave me a Starbucks on the porch?" I'm like, "Of course. Like, if that's what will make you happy, the Starbucks is all yours." And I remember during my second pregnancy, my friend who has 5 kids, so she is well versed, but she said, "Hey, I'll pop over and visit you at the hospital." And I was like, "No, I love you to death, but I cannot, because all I need to do is try to sleep as much as I can before I go home." And she was like, "Absolutely, 100%. Like, do that. Well, I'll check back in when you get home." So I do think,
Oh, yeah.
that's another area that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is when we have some of these well-meaning family members or even friends, uh, the people in our village, when they're overstepping or they're trying to do something that they view to be helpful but doesn't feel helpful to you, I would love to know, do you have any particular language that you share with people or things that they can say that help them get the support they need without offending people who are trying to be helpful with good intentions?
Okay. Here's more real talk, Allison. This is this is one of those things. It is not easy. It is terrifying. You're going to feel anxious and awkward. So let's just accept that confronting anything like this feels just very intimidating, right? And we can say everything, we can speak, we can practice, we can choose the right words, we can try not to offend. And and those people still might be offended, right? Because we don't really have a lot of control over that part. Whatever they take from us, they're going to take. So we have to like try to, of course, be respectful, um, but we don't need to carry around that burden that like we're going to hurt somebody's feelings, because it's not really about that. You are speaking up in order to get your needs met. So that's the first part. Um, and prevention, what was that saying? Prevention is worth a pound of cure, or something like that. I think it was Ben Franklin that said that. But being proactive in this area can save you a lot of heartache. Um, and of course, if that doesn't happen, then yeah, we'll talk about addressing it. But on the part of like being like trying to prevent any of this stuff, I think that one of the best things to do is during that time, during pregnancy, while you're planning everything, while you're registering for all the stuff, put together, you and your partner talk about, what do you envision those first maybe couple weeks of bringing baby home. Like, what do you want that to look like? what do you want to have visitors over? Do you want to just settle in as a little family unit for a while? And if whatever you decide is okay because it's your life and you are starting off on this incredible journey with this tiny human. And if you want all the people around, all your family and friends and having an open house, like go for it. But if you don't, there's nothing wrong with that. So I say, like, put together, it could be an email or a group text, any way, or you can actually like call people or say it to them in person at the baby shower or whatever you want to do. But communicate it somehow and express like that. Speaking for yourself, any of our listeners who've been through any kind of therapy or marriage counseling probably have heard the term I statements before. And so that's what we want to do. You're speaking for you. You're not saying to them, well, you guys can really be a little annoying sometimes. So we're going to ask that you just leave us the hell alone. We're not attacking anybody. We're just speaking up for us. So try to make those statements, I, using the I statement. So you could say, so we've decided that when we bring baby home, we want to settle in just on our own for a couple of weeks before having any visitors over. So if you'd like to support us, please consider dropping off a meal in a cooler, sending us a restaurant gift card or DoorDash gift card, or contributing to our fund for a postpartum doula. And these are some ways that would be really helpful. But we'll be in touch when we're ready to have you over to meet baby, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if you're not proactive and you haven't done that, it's a little harder. But same kind of language, speaking for yourself and saying like, actually, no, we're not going to have like what you did with your friend who wanted to come to the hospital. A lot of people just assume that you're going to want visitors in the hospital. And I don't know even what those policies are like right now in hospitals. With COVID. I don't know what's going on, but regardless of that fact, it really is about what you want. So saying like, actually, we're not going to have anyone come visit us in the hospital. We just kind of want to ease our way into this and get as much rest as possible and enough time with the nurses and the lactation people. And we really just want to start out on the right foot. So we'll get in touch with you when we're ready to have visitors, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, Other situations where maybe like you do have family in the house, but they're maybe just overstepping in terms of like telling you how to breastfeed or telling you like, oh, well, you shouldn't use those kinds of diapers, whatever. Like people have
Right.
opinions on everything. Especially when you're like the minute you become pregnant, I swear, like everybody in your life and even strangers just suddenly like they think they have an invitation to just tell you everything that they have learned about parenthood and exactly what you should be doing.
Totally.
So you can always say, no, thank you. We have that figured out. You can just say something simple like that. Or, oh, that's really good information. Thank you for sharing. I'm gonna like be doing this instead. Or I don't know what we're gonna do about that yet. Like a lot of people might say, like, well, have you chosen a daycare? Oh, are you using that pediatrician? Oh, I've heard terrible, whatever. Um, you can just say like, okay, well, we got it though. We got it figured out. And if we run into any problems, like, and we think you can help, we'll let you know. Something like
Yeah.
that. Again, speaking up for yourself.
I love that you mentioned using the I, we statements because it reminds me of a story I've shared on the podcast before that after having our first daughter, Addison, Mike and I met with a marriage counselor. And I always tell people that the most helpful piece of advice he gave us was around managing family expectations. And at the time, we were both feeling pressure that our both of our families wanted to have us at different things, which was a good thing, but it put a lot of pressure on us because it was, where are we going to spend Thanksgiving? Where are we going to spend Christmas? Does it have to be perfectly even? And so there was a lot of pressure in that department. And so we were talking through that with this counselor, and he said, you have to change your perspective a little bit. And you have to remember that now your priority has to be your family unit. So at the time, Mike, me, and Addison. And every time we came to one of those decisions, he said, or one of those choices, he said that we needed to
Mhm.
decide what we thought was best for our family unit, make a decision, just he and I making the decision, what is best for our family unit for that particular decision, whether that be where we're going to go for Christmas or if we're going to go on vacation, whatever it may be. And then it was our job to just communicate that we had made this decision. And what wasn't our job was to be too caught up in how they responded. So their feelings or their reactions were not our problem, is basically what he had told us. So I love that you're suggesting taking that same approach when it comes to communicating the decisions that you have made for your family or what's most helpful for you during that postpartum time.
Yes, right, and it was probably really scary the first time you did that, you put that into practice, but, like, the more you do it, you start to you start to feel empowered, and you start to feel like, "Okay, well, they may not like that, but it wasn't that bad," you just get used to it. It's a brain thing, like, our brains feel threatened by all kinds of things that aren't actual threats, and, instead of having a confrontational conversation, can feel like that. It can feel like a threat. It can feel like your brain is thinking, we are about to die. A saber-toothed tiger is chasing us. But really, no, we're just having a conversation, with a nosy family member. And yeah, and the more you practice it, the more your brain gets, catches on that like, oh, we survived that. We survived that conversation. And we survived that one and that one. And then you just keep going. And I think that's the beauty of that is one of the perks I think of motherhood is that you just start to speak up and advocate for your kid. And it kind of just, I don't know, it gets easier as time goes on because you will have opportunity after opportunity to do that because there's always going to be somebody, saying something that you don't like or asking or giving their opinion where it wasn't invited. Um, and so the more you can speak up for yourself, the better off like you'll be. And sometimes you have to ask yourself too, like, well, what is the worst that will happen if I say this? What is the worst that will happen? Like, will that person like not be your friend anymore? Or will that, if that person is a parent, are they going to like never speak to you again? You just had their first grandchild, so probably I think they're gonna be in the picture, like it might take some time and there might be some hurt feelings, but like, what's the alternative? To not ever ask for what you need? And then that's where resentment grows, and that's a whole other podcast, so
Totally. So now another area I want to touch on is talking about the moms who either don't have family members nearby or maybe they do have members nearby, but they're not family members that are going to play a really active role in their postpartum support circle. So, what advice do you have for those women as they think about preparing for their postpartum experience when they aren't going to have that natural village to support them?
it's so true, right? Like, we are so, spread out and isolated, in our modern lives, and so I don't even know I would probably say, like, most people may not have family nearby, um, but that doesn't mean you can't get support, and we are just not, wired to mother all alone. So during your pregnancy, I think that's a great time to look for maybe local support groups, or you could even like there are tons of virtual ones, of course, and that's not as ideal. I think, especially for the long term, like when you really want to like build a support network, you want to definitely have people who are local to you. But start wherever feels start with whatever feels most doable for you. So if that means looking online, like, start there. Um, and again, PSI has virtual support groups for pregnancy too. So it's not just for postpartum. And I think a pregnancy, oh, maybe there's a walking group or something like, or maybe just a book club or something like that, where you can just start to build some relationships, get to know other women in your area who are also expecting a baby, um, and that can be really, that can just feel, it can feel scary, like all this stuff. It's all scary. Nobody likes making new friends. I mean, some people say they do, but like nobody likes that feeling of like, what if they don't like me? What if I don't have anything to say? What if, but we have to start somewhere. And so I think, yeah, so looking at locally for any kind of groups or um, maybe your OBGYN even would be a good resource for stuff like that. So groups, I'm a fan of that. Also, uh, just thinking about the things that you enjoy already. So if you're already into fitness, maybe look up the places that are offering prenatal yoga or something like that. And then, because in a prenatal yoga class, there's going to be other pregnant people there, and you can kind of get to know people like that. It's just like starting any relationship and looking for somebody to connect with. It can be intimidating at first, but if you just follow your natural interests, you can find other people that you may be compatible with. There's also, postpartum doulas are a great option, if you can afford that, or if maybe register for that, and ask for people to contribute to a fund to help you afford that. A postpartum doula, I feel like I had a doula for my childbirth, but if I had to choose one over the other, I would say postpartum all the way, because once you get home, that is when you are feeling all alone and like you have no idea what you're doing. So a postpartum doula will come and spend the night. They will do some of that laundry. They will do some of that housekeeping for you. Some of them, they will help you, care for baby. They know it all. Some of them even like can help with breastfeeding problems and things like that. Sleep, all of the things. They are a great resource. And so if you can hire one for that first year of your child's life, just kidding. Um, at least maybe the first week. Whatever you can afford, like do it. Yeah, yeah. So I'm a fan of hiring it out. When you're isolated from people and you don't have a lot of support, if you can afford it, if you can figure out how to get people to help you afford it, then hire that stuff.
This has all been so helpful. So, thank you so much. And before we wrap up, is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you were hoping to share?
I don't think I feel like I talked a lot, Allison. Just don't forget about all of the different kinds of support. Support doesn't look like just sitting down with a friend and just unloading all your problems. Like, it can look like, oh, I don't like after having the baby, like something about like my my legs or my abdominal area doesn't feel quite right. Like call your doctor, call your doctor and ask. What's the harm in calling, right? They may say, "Oh, that sounds like a pelvic floor issue. We have this physical therapist we can recommend." Like it's all of those things. It's your physical health, it's your mental health. Um, it's all related, and it's all self-care, all of that is. So find out what's out there, find out what's in your local area. And since the pandemic, so many different resources are suddenly accessible online that you never would have imagined before, like a sleep coach like you. Like I used to think about sleep coaching being something like a person comes to your house, but like no, like it's virtual. And yeah, if you are feeling like, is there anything I could be doing to help my baby sleep at this age? Call Allison. She knows how to help you. Like don't suffer alone through any of this. That's my big message. Don't do this alone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Kayce. Can you please tell everyone how they can find you?
Oh, yes. Please find me at kaycehodos.com. It's KayceHodos.com. I have an exciting audio series coming up, speaking with different experts in the perinatal field about this very topic, like preparing during pregnancy for a mentally healthy postpartum. So that'll be, and you can find it there. At that link. And yeah, get in touch with me. I'm on Instagram at Kayce_Hodos. Yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. We will link to everything in the show notes. And thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to this episode on a topic that is very important and near and dear to my heart. If you would like to hear more episodes related to maternal mental health, I encourage you to check out episodes 29, 30, 31, 32, and episode 82. Thanks again, Kayce. Bye for now.
Bye, Allison.
Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.